Love you. Your last name. Thank you. Does anybody need like a stretch break or anything? I'm Jennifer Wexton, and I'm running to repeal and replace Barbara Comstock. Now, like a lot of other people on this panel, and you might find this hard to believe, I never aspired to run for office. You know, I went to law school because I wanted to help people. I wanted to be in a career where I could help people. And I was able to do that as a prosecutor, and I was able to do that as a lawyer for abused and neglected kids, and I was able to do it as a lawyer and a special justice for people in mental commitment hearings. But when our elected Commonwealth's attorney in Loudoun County started using his office to reward his political friends and go after his political enemies, I was, and Paul would agree with this, I was horrified by that. And nobody was willing to stand up to him. Everybody agreed that it was a terrible thing he was doing, but nobody was willing to stand up to him. Now, I've been very inspired by Barack Obama and the Obama campaign in 2008. That was the first time I really got out and started knocking on doors and getting outside my comfort zone and getting involved in political campaigns. So I said, well, maybe, yes, I can. And so I ran countywide in 2011 with nothing but some homemade lit and a great message, and I got out every weekend from April until Election Day, and many weeknights, and I knocked on doors, and I talked to voters, and I talked to them about why they deserved a prosecutor, not a politician, in the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office. And in a year that saw a Republican sweep, 9-0, of our Board of Supervisors, and only one elected Democrat in the entire General Assembly delegation from Loudoun County, I did not win. But I almost took him out. And a lot of people took notice. Now after that, I really started paying very close attention to what was going on in the state government. And some of you may remember back in the 2012, early 2013 session, kind of stuff that was coming out of Richmond. And I started paying attention to what was happening, and frankly, I was, again, pretty horrified. Because this was the time, under the McDonnell administration, that Republicans had a majority in the House of Delegates and a slim majority in the State Senate. And this is the time that they did things like pass voter suppression legislation. This was the time that they repealed one of the very few common sense pieces of gun safety legislation we have in Virginia, one handgun a month. And who can forget everybody's favorite, the transvaginal ultrasounds, right? So I worked very hard in 2013 to help elect Governor McAuliffe, Lieutenant Governor Northam, and my friend Mark Herring to the Attorney General's office and fight for House of Delegate seats as well. And when Mark Herring became Attorney General and the Republican Party was poised to nominate a candidate whose claim to fame was telling an anti-Semitic joke at a Ken Cuccinelli rally, I knew that I had to step up again. And I stepped up and I ran for the Senate and I won. This time I won by a bunch. So I went down to Richmond and I got to work legislating. Now, ever since I've been able to introduce legislation in the General Assembly, I've been in the minority. So every piece of legislation that I pass, and there have been over 30 of them, is bipartisan. I need to work across the aisle with Republicans to get things done. Now that hasn't stopped me from championing legislation for things like equal pay, paid medical leave, gun safety legislation, non-discrimination in housing and employment. Now, we haven't had as much luck getting those things passed, but I have been able to find common ground on some issues. I've had success with legislation to keep kids safer in daycares and online. I've passed legislation to help help combat the heroin and opioid crisis that we're facing in Virginia. And I've even had success with helping to stem the school-to-prison pipeline and get started on criminal justice reform, and hopefully we'll be able to have some more success with those efforts this session and in future sessions. But now, after the unfortunate events of November 2016, I know that it's time to step up again. We need to win this seat. And I am the best chance to do that. Day after I announced my candidacy, the Cook Report moved the rating for this race from lean Republican to a toss-up. And they cited my entry into the race as their reason for doing so. Why? Because I am a successful, popular legislator from the heart of the district in central and eastern Loudoun, western Fairfax County. These are all a bunch of fantastic candidates. They are wonderful people, and any one of us would be a huge upgrade over our But I want to, and I do want to get to questions and stuff, but one of the things I want to leave you with is that having been down in the General Assembly, how many of you have been watching the live stream of any of the things that have been going on in Richmond?
Oh, yeah.
Okay? Yeah, I encourage you to do so if you haven't already, because there's a lot of things going on there, a lot of shenanigans. We're so close, people. We did so much great stuff in November of this year, but we are still so far. The only thing that matters is winning back the majority in the House of Representatives. And the only way we are going to do that is through Virginia 10. So I'm happy to take questions or talk with you some more about other things that have been going on.
So it's a question that I think it would be interesting to hear from all candidates, but from you is, if you're the nominee, what's Barbara Comstock's attack going to be on you, and what would be your response?
Well, I think we saw what her attack on me was going to be. I think we saw a preview of it with everything that they did for Ralph Northam. I voted against the Sanctuary Cities bill, so I would imagine they'll use that against me. Past things they've said about me is I'm a tax and spend liberal, right? All those basic kinds of things that they would want to say. So I would imagine it's the same playbook that they trot out for just about every Democratic candidate. But thankfully, people are smarter than that. And people saw right through what they were trying to do in November, and I expect they will again this year.
I had a call from my daughter that is in California. I was very scared. She asked me to talk to that assembly with the candidates about the need to pass in the state of Virginia the amendment of the Constitution, because I understand that it's necessary that Virginia pass this in order to put the women equality in the Constitution of the United States. What is your view?
So the Equal Rights Amendment, we have been trying for years to get that passed in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I have co-sponsored that legislation ever since I've been able. In past years, we were able to get it through the Privileges and Elections Committee, through the full Senate, where it died in the House. Well, then they got wise to that, so they started sending it to the Rules Committee, where it died in Rules. And I know some people in this room were either present or watching online when Friday morning, they weren't even going to take a vote on it in the Rules Committee until the women rose up, started singing "We Shall Overcome," and eventually they had no choice but to do a show of hands vote. But the male Republicans on that committee killed the ERA yet again in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And this is why we need to take back the majority, because that's what's going to change the way that they do business. I think we probably have time for one more question.
I have one here. I mean, I've been waiting for long.
I'll allow you to talk to you.
How would you convince a Trump voter to vote for you?
Everything that I have done as a legislator, I'm always trying to look out for the little guy. I'm always going to have their back. I'm always trying to do the greatest good for the greatest number of people. And I do not support special interests or, business interests above the interests of people. So I think forming those interpersonal connections and talking about, all the things that I've done, and the fact that they have a real alternative, and if they don't like where this country is going, and they don't like the way that Donald Trump and his merry band of kleptocrats are trying to run our country, they have a real alternative for something positive. So thank you.